Fire up the tape.
You ready? Okay, we are live. Turn your mic on. Yes, sir.
Jeez. Turn your mic.
Guy doing all the shouting.
Okay, we will get back started here again. Sorry for the delay, but now want to make sure we have this all on the record and burning on the DVD and USB drive. So thank you for your waiting.
I've got a question or two. I guess my main one, I get concerned when I hear about sewer backups. Are you to that point of getting any permits for sewage and understanding the size of the main that's in there? And is a lift station going to need some work or upgrading?
We're not at that point yet.
Okay. And is laundry going to be done on site?
Yes,
And there'll be a kitchen and meals prepared?
yes.
Okay.
But if, if you compare it to the Seven Seas, and they're serving 1,000 people in a week, in 2 days.
But they aren't bathing and they aren't having laundry and...
Well, not all
that.
our residents are going to be bathing at the same time either.
Oh, I
You
don't
know,
mean
or
same
doing
time, and
laundry,
I
but,
fully understand that, but it's,
Usage.
Yeah.
okay. And then there'll be a significant change in the well, I'm assuming?
Again, we're not at that point yet.
Not at that
to look at.
Okay, that's all I got.
Chris, the one citizen comment about the agreement with the Seven Seas family there that was news to me. I'd never heard that before. Do you want to comment on that, or your attorney comment on that? Because they were very specific with their view of where they will take this.
I've seen the agreement and I've read the agreement, and we don't believe that the agreement is valid any longer. There were some conditions under the agreement, and the agreement went on for certain conditions continued, and those conditions have not continued. For example, it says that so long as the Shannons and the Giles own certain properties, then the Weisgervers cannot expand the existing building. One, they don't own the same properties that they owned before. They sold several of them, so it fails for that reason. It also fails because we're not looking at expanding the existing building, and it was very specific about saying the existing structure. So we believe that if there was a court challenge, and we're willing to take that on, that we would prevail.
Okay. And you're prepared for, nobody wins in litigation except for lawyers, but and time. So are you prepared to litigate for a year to get that resolved if that would happen?
We would hope that we could come to some resolution. We've reached out, but we've yet to have a resolution. If that's what it takes, we will do that, but that would be a very last resort.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question again. Do you know the current zoning of that property? Because it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, we went through back last fall to go with 3 single-family properties, but the paperwork wasn't submitted through the county, correct, or something of that nature?
So the subject property is owned RL1. They did not follow through taking the certified survey map to Common Council. So
Okay.
it hasn't even gone through Common Council yet,
Okay.
because they switched paths.
So what status do we give that then? What's the technical status of that?
Of the certified survey map to divide the parcels, it's pending. I mean, if they don't move forward with it, then they continue to have a single parcel.
So it's still right now currently a single
So-
parcel? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And then how is the conditional use? Is it still valid? The old conditional use, or do we have to create a new one?
The restaurant, there is an ordinance requirement, and correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney Hammes, but because it's a non-conforming conditional use, after that use has been vacant for, is it 12 months?
12 months, right.
Then
So
it's no longer valid.
Right, so the conditional, it is a non-conforming use, but
If it's discontinued for a period of more than 12 months, then it terminates. So tomorrow, I can't remember when the operation, I thought it stopped a while ago, but.
December of
December.
2020.
Okay, so a restaurant could resume activity on the property as long, within that 12-month period of time.
But you need a new conditional
No.
use for this.
Well, for this you
Yes.
do, right. But a new restaurant could go in there within, so as long as it is not discontinued for 12 months, so anytime between now and December.
I've got a question. Do you operate, it looks like about, I don't know, is it 9 or 10 or 8? How many?
We have 10 CBRs right now.
Okay. And they're not, I mean, CBRF isn't, that's, covers a lot of different scales, right? I mean, you've got some that are, like, some pictures were passed around, and I did look at your website at one point. You've got some that are like ranch houses and.
Yep,
so there's-
smaller, yep, some
Okay.
larger.
Have you ever, are some of the larger ones, were those built by you in residential neighborhoods?
Yeah, so our location in New Berlin, there's single-family houses all around. And that's a 48-bed. And no issues with the neighbors. They've never heard a complaint from them at all.
Okay. One thing that Doug Saluga brought up was our 2030 comprehensive plan. I mean, you've got a couple people that have served or are serving on plan commissions. I'm sure you're familiar with what those are all about. Did you take a look at that? I mean, are you looking at the different goals and objectives of the city and that when it comes to land use and zoning and all that is a comprehensive plan? Did you look at that to see how you fit in with some of those our city's long-term goals and objectives?
Can you tell me specifically what you're
Any of
referring
them.
to?
Any of them. Like how does this proposal help check some boxes on the city's 2030 comprehensive plan as opposed to what was there before or possibly putting 3 houses there?
I think the point is that the CBRF does fall within a a residential use. It's a different type of residential use, but it still is a residential use. And the current zoning does allow for the use of CBRFs. So since it already is allowed under your zoning and it is a residential use, it seems that it fits in with the future residential use.
That was not my question.
What is
My question is, how does this proposal help the city achieve some of the goals and objectives that are in the 2030 comprehensive plan? Specifically, not just to say it complies with zoning, because that's not in our plan.
Maybe more specifically, the comprehensive plan defines as residential for this area. And
Yes.
we're in the residential zoning.
That-
So that is how you fall within a comprehensive plan.
So, okay. So I guess I'm getting down to, you guys didn't look at our plan, or did you look at the 2030 plan at all? At our city's comprehensive plan? Because frankly, that's the spirit in which we're supposed to operate. I mean, the zoning is the technical rules. And then when there's discretion as far as how to apply those rules, the plan that took, I mean, it's thousands of hours and millions of dollars that the state spent to help fund this statewide
Absolutely.
effort.
So
over
your
the last 20
comprehensive
years.
plan states residential?
That's zoning, but, so I guess my point is, it doesn't sound like you guys looked at that. It's a very good thing to do to help us do our jobs. Because there's some very specific things. There's very specific things in our comprehensive plan as far as how we're supposed to apply our zoning rules and that, especially when it comes to CBRFs being of all sorts of shapes and sizes. One thing that's very explicitly pointed out in our goals and objectives for residential lake properties in our land use plan is that it's not just once, it's at least a dozen times talking about what the proper density is for individual properties. And something that was, one of the things that's quite explicitly listed in there is the work that was done in 1990. They restated the 1991 comprehensive plan, saying, and this was in 2009 when this was redone, kind of patting themselves on the back as a city and a plan commission for adhering to that the density of zoning in and around the lake properties being no greater than 4 units per 1 acre. And it was restated then in 2010 when this was signed, or 2009, 2010 when this was signed, put back into place, was to maintain that zoning for the quality and the character of the lake and the residential properties. And so being that CBRFs are allowed generically, a generic CBRF, anywhere in residential or anywhere in the city, we looked at things like our comprehensive plan to see how they fit in and how they meet the goals and objectives of the city and what the spirit of that zoning law is. And I'm just trying to figure out how we don't step on the character or really kind of shred part of our comprehensive plan by putting this kind of density in on a 4-acre parcel. Because we're not against CBRFs. We've got at least 3 of them in the city. Clearview is just right up the street here, and they're on, I think, 5 acres, and there's about, I think there's 6 units in there. And there's Rogers, and they predate some of these plans even, so they're kind of grandfathered in. And Rogers is on Oakwood, and that's on 9 acres, and that's 24 beds. It's 2 separate buildings that are kind of tucked away, like you talked about setback. And then we've got Heritage, which was approved. We worked hard to help that happen in a business district. And they've got, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 90 residents there, and I don't think they're all classified as a CBRF, but a good chunk of them are. But so those are different scales, and that was placed, I think, appropriately in a business district. And where we do have CBRFs in residential, they either predate the zoning or they fit in real nice. So my point is, if you were asked, one of the conditions to approve a CBRF on this property was to respect the comprehensive plan as far as 4 units per acre, is that something that would work for you?
No, it wouldn't. Just to be real upfront.
Tim,
Please.
can I just interject on that issue? Because as a staff, we did look at that closely, and the way we were interpreting it is that density in particular is not of consideration because they're not building separate residential units. Now, I know someone in the audience had brought up the definition specifically, and maybe that's another conversation to have. But as of now, we've gone over land use and zoning with the applicant and came to the interpretation that density in itself wasn't an issue because these are not separate living units. We're not considering it multifamily. They're not applying for a conditional use for planned unit development this time. It's for the CBRF. So I would at least be cautious with that without further analysis from the city attorney.
Sure. One of the things you said in our last meeting was that taxes came up then too, or what some of the positives of your development were, and you rather explicitly stated that you're a for-profit business. And so would you classify this as a commercial enterprise? I mean, is there a different word for it, or how would you describe, what you're placing here? So the CBRF is certainly a term for it, but it's a business, correct?
Well, we are an operator. Castle Living is an operator. So, yeah, essentially it is a business that's operating it. If that helps answer the question. Okay. It is taxable.
All right.
Another follow-up question, if I can. And I know there's still a lot more to develop, right? A lot more details to kind of get into. So, but I was just, as you were kind of presenting, I think maybe I misunderstood. You said you were going to leave the boathouse, and it made me think. I was like, why do you need a boathouse given what the business is and the people that are in it? That just made me think. What do you need the lakefront for? With a boathouse, without it, what's the use intent there? Because
Yeah.
as you describe your constituents, you don't really want them down by the lake too much, do you? From the safety, I thought one of the citizens brought up the safety thing was something I hadn't thought of. I'm like, wow, that is concerning.
We'll definitely be taking some pontoon boat rides. That's one of the amenities we're looking forward to doing. The boathouse, keeping the lower level is actually a request from the neighbor. He asked that we try to keep that because it helps protect his boathouse and shoreline. So we're trying to accommodate his request.
Thanks.
Okay, are there any other questions for the applicant? All right. Great, thank you guys, ladies. We'll have you go back to your seats, and then Planning Commission now is gonna deliberate.
Right, okay, so the public hearing is now closed.
You,
Can I ask one question?
nope, citizens' comments are done, I'm sorry.
It's not a comment, it's a question.
Citizens'
Questions?
questions and comments are done. So, Jim, you want to vote on that we're closing?
No, I think you just declare it closed. We've taken all of the comments that was outlined, so now it's a matter for Planning Commission to discuss as to how they want to proceed.
Okay,
But it has to be closed.
so the public hearing is now closed.
Right.
So can I just, before you get into the discussion and action, I do want to share some things that I shared with the applicant regarding what is in your code for conditional uses and what you can be considering. So your decision can be based on the purpose and intent of the ordinance. Some of those things identified as, and I'm just going to read this so that it's clear. It's the general intent of the chapter to regulate and restrict the use of all structures and lands, regulate and restrict lot coverage, population distribution and density, and the size and location of all structures, to lessen congestion in and promote the safety and efficiency of streets and highways, secure safety from fire, flooding, panic, and other dangers, prevent overcrowding, avoid undue population concentration, facilitate the adequate provision of public facilities and utilities, stabilize and protect property values, further conservation of natural resources and the appropriate use of land, preserve and promote the beauty and environmental quality of the community, implement the community's comprehensive plan or plan components, and achieve those purposes in view set forth in the statute 6223(7)(c. And then the conditional use being proposed needs to be found to not be hazardous, harmful, offensive, or otherwise adverse to the environment or the value of the neighborhood or community. The Plan Commission shall review site, existing and proposed structures, architectural plans, neighboring uses, parking areas, driveway locations, highway access, traffic generation, circulation, drainage, sewerage, and water systems in proposed operation. The Plan Commission shall base its determination on the effect of such grant on the health, safety, and welfare of the community and of the immediate neighborhood in which such use would be located, including considerations as compatibility with existing uses, problems of fire and police protection, traffic movement and control, water, sanitation, and utility impacts, aesthetically or otherwise, on surrounding property values, noise, dust, smoke, odor, or such other factors appropriate to the granting of a CU. And the purpose of the chapter is to promote health, safety, morals, prosperity, aesthetics, orderly development, and general welfare of the community. So hopefully that helps in your decision making. It's a long list. It is.
Well, I'll start. I got a question. How the regulations for CVRF, how much of that overrides what Amy just read?
Well, because of the number of units being requested, okay, so if you're doing a CBRF that's 8 units or less, they're pretty much allowed, subject to distance limitations. But because of this size, they are required to obtain, under our code, a conditional use. So, I don't know. So you have to take a look at the application for conditional use, what's been presented, and then look at the standards that you would apply to a conditional use. For example, there was questions that were raised about the ability for emergency vehicles to access this site, okay? There were questions, a lot of issues related to compatibility with the surrounding properties. Those are the factors that you need to take a look at. One thing, it's been here 3 hours or better an hour or whatever. One issue that I didn't hear anything on is why 54 units? Why not 80? Why not 30? How does that, you have the size of the building. Those are, I think, issues that you have to take a look at.
Well, I think, Tim, you kind of asked that question when you said, right?
Density.
That was kind of,
Yeah, what I was relating is the other CBRFs, how they are located, why they're located there, and their relative size and scale with the surrounding neighborhood and uses. So like the Clearview, which is right here, which has, I'm pretty sure it's under 10 units. They're right across the street is R4 zoning. And the Rogers facility, which is a 16-unit building and an 8-unit building, is on 9 acres. And like I said, it was a nursing home at one point back when it was first approved. And its existence predates the RE2 subdivision immediately adjacent to it. So that was residential use that came in, next door to it after the fact, knowing full well what was there. And then Heritage, like I said, that's a large facility, and it was deemed appropriate where it is. We worked with the developers agreement to get that modified in a way that could go, because that was actually, as big as it is, it was favorable use versus a big restaurant or something, which would have been just instantly approved because of the type of character, and impact it would have there versus a real busy.
What was that one zoned at the time?
That's business. It was a commercial property. I don't know which B zoning it was, but it was a business district, and it was.
Yeah.
I think it was a planned development.
That was a planned
too.
unit development.
Yeah, it was a planned unit development.
Would this conditional use be considered a planned development then?
No.
No.
Jim, were you saying that you can have a conditional limit on the size?
Well, there's a conditional use for a CBRF. Okay, the request is for 54 units, right? But I'm saying why 54? Well, there was really no explanation that I heard, but again, I'm just pointing that out, I guess.
But
observing.
Tim was asking early on, can you have a conditional use that says 8? I'm just making up a number.
Well, if it was 8 or less, you wouldn't have a conditional use.
Okay, 10. Can you?
Right. Then you
can
would
you do that?
Well, right. Well, if it was over 8, then it's going to require conditional use.
And you could have a limit number in there.
Right. The request is for 54 units. Right.
Yeah.
That's.
But Dan, you would need to tie, if you're limiting the number of units, it would need to be tied to a
criteria
that, substantial evidence that the sewerage only
I was
handles
just going to
so
bring that
many
up.
units.
What I heard, which I'm not familiar with, and I'm not a Department of Works kind of person, but you heard a lot of sewage issues there, and I don't know fact from fiction, but it sounded like something that is of concern for a lot of people. And I don't know how we figure out if that's a real issue or not. I don't know.
And when you mentioned the zoning and comprehensive plan, could you just repeat that sentence around the zoning and comprehensive plan and what we're deciding?
I think in the land use plan, probably the major factor in the lake residential area is to preserve the character and unique qualities of that area is something to consider. And then as far as the zoning code goes, it was a pretty long list of things, but the purpose and intent of the code is the reason why you have regulations, so you don't have completely unregulated development, is to, in general, lessen congestion and promote safety, efficiency of streets and highways. That doesn't mean no new development. It means consider those items. Secure safety from fire, flooding, panic, and other dangers. Prevent overcrowding, avoid undue population concentration, facilitate the adequate provision of public facilities and utilities, stabilize and protect property values, further conservation of natural resources and appropriate use of land, preserve and promote beauty and environmental quality of the community, implement the community's plan or plan components. And then there's several other things that need to be considered, which is part of the whole site plan process. We wouldn't approve the development if the sewage isn't adequate and they don't provide enough stormwater management. If you passed it with those conditions in place, it would then need to go to Public Works Committee and be fully reviewed
But
and
does
vetted.
the language say consistent with the comprehensive plan?
Implement the community's comprehensive plan. I just want to be, the density issue is, we weren't looking at it from a density perspective because they weren't individualized, separate residential units. It's part of a CBRF, community with a common.
But I think the intent of the comprehensive plan was to limit the density.
And that would be a question for Attorney Hammes. We've had these conversations, so I don't know if you have any comments.
Well, yeah, this was an unusual situation because I agree. I think it was Mr. Gardner that read the definition of dwelling unit. I think it's dwelling unit in our code, which doesn't refer to a specific, like you had to have a kitchen or something like that. It doesn't say that anywhere in our code. So that's true. But this is a conditional use for a CBRF, which is it's not the same thing as saying 52 or 54 apartments, okay, as that is used in our comprehensive plan. It's just not the same because it is a CBRF. But you still have all the other factors that you need to take a look at. I mean, consistency with the comprehensive plan doesn't necessarily mean consistency. It doesn't mean you focus only on the dwelling units. You look at the overall intent of the comprehensive plan, right? That's what the code is saying here, and factors to be considered.
And along those points, on a different topic than just density, and I think the density is really, and what we focus on a lot is intensity of use of a piece of land. When you're thinking about like uses or compatibility, but it does specifically state, I know in our comprehensive plan, that we are supposed to discourage commercial uses in residential areas and encourage development that is compatible with neighboring uses and preserves the character of the neighborhood.
And is sized in an appropriate location.
Yeah. And so I think one of the things was brought up a lot here that I've been chewing on is the idea that what do we compare this to? Do you compare it to something that's defunct, or do you compare it with something that was purposely zoned out from around the lake a long time ago? And this city took steps a long time ago to say we are not going to allow commercial development on the lake.
I just want to caution you because you made a decision, the city made a decision in the CU section to say that CBRFs are allowed in all districts. So you have to be careful with the land use plan because that's where the CUs become unique in that a decision has been made that they are unique uses that don't perfectly fit within any zoning district, and it becomes more site specific. And I think at the last meeting I used church as an example. Churches are conditional uses that are allowed in just about any district. So is it a business? Is it institutional? They are often in agricultural districts. When you read the agricultural category in the land use plan, it says that it's agricultural. But the city made a separate decision, a regulatory decision to allow them outside of those institutional categories. And so this would be another example of that. If you want to call it commercial or residential, your code doesn't say it's not allowed in residential.
So our code allows all of this, but our intent of the comprehensive plan would indicate otherwise. So we're kind of riding.
I'll let Hamas.
Well, I guess the code, let's see if I'm on here, yeah. The code allows it, okay, but there are still, you know, but it allows it as a conditional use, okay, not as a permitted use. So when you look at whether or not you're going to grant a conditional use, I think you can look at whether or not the use is consistent with the general principles of the comprehensive plan, putting aside the density issue that we talked about, because that really, I don't think applies here, because this is, you can't compare this to apartments or single-family homes. So I do think you have, or one of the factors you can consider is the overall, as Tim has pointed out, purposes of the comprehensive plan when you grant or when you're considering whether to grant or deny conditional use.
Amy, there was obviously discrepancy on the, you talk about safety, right? That's one of the factors here. There was obviously a discrepancy on the traffic plan as presented by the development team as opposed to the citizens. Did you look into that at all? Do you have any thoughts on that you want to share?
So with some of this stuff too, if you feel that more information is necessary or more analysis, that is certainly something we can do. We did have a traffic engineer review the traffic impact study, and they found it to be reasonable. But again, that's without the information provided tonight.
Yeah, because that seems to be a pretty big factor that should. There was a big gap, right, between two versions of events that probably we need more information for sure on that, don't you think? Or I don't know.
That's kind of my point about what we're supposed to compare this to, as far as a winner not, because it may or may not be a restaurant ever again, right? But the restaurant patterns and what people bought and sold houses and developed nearby were based on a known entity that had a certain kind of cadence to it, as far as when the peak times were, when the noises were, and the days that they weren't open, and the hours of operation of that enterprise, and how much traffic it generated and when. This is, it was stated by the applicant that this is a business, and it's a 24/7 business. I mean, that's one of the objections we had when we looked at the CBRF for Heritage. It's like, this is a 24/7 business plan of operation, and that was not allowed in that developer's agreement, so that had to be changed. They needed to be shut down. Anytime Fitness there wasn't open anytime, for an example, or whatever that was called. So that was the reason that condition was put in the developer's agreement is because of the impact of a 24-hour, business operation, and that's, I think, some of the citizens' concerns here about the character of the neighborhood when you've got third shift people coming in. I mean, it might just be two people, but there's going to be people coming and going at all hours, and 150 trips a day is certainly a lot more impactful to the neighbors in that than what would be generated by 3 residences, especially when, regardless of how massive some of the lake homes are, some people are still only in there during the summer, and gone a lot too. So that's my point about what do you compare it to? The same goes for the water usage and sewage. I'm less concerned about sewer, not because there's not existing issues, but because those can be resolved a lot easier than people's long-term concerns about well, and that we get that will come up at our next step if it moves forward. I'm sure as people saying, wanting to do a study on water and the difference between what it's zoned for, which is three homes, and I don't know, so 15 bathrooms, let's say, versus 54 bathrooms and sinks and showers and a place that serves 2 or 3 meals a day.
Does everyone have the laundry list of conditional use things that we're supposed to consider? I don't know if the newer
I think
people
I have
have
a
it.
partial one.
But it's a laundry list of items, and I know I could poke a few holes in a number of these things. But I want to be a little sensitive to the public input we received tonight too, on top of all that and the technicalities we've been talking about. My tally showed there were 32 against and 8 for. And to me, I definitely want to take that into consideration.
Am I wrong, as I kind of remember this, that CU, even the granting of a CU, it still has to follow the spirit of the ordinance or the zoning that it's in?
Well, I'll let Attorney
I
Hammes
didn't-
answer
I'm
that,
sorry,
but
I didn't hear the question.
I think, what I was kind of spewing off before
Yeah.
would be the standards that you should be
Right,
considering.
so that is, we have to consider that. That is, even with the granting of a CU, it still has to fall within that. We have to stay within the spirit of the original, the zoning right now.
In the conditions that you would require and/or that the applicant needs to agree to meet standards to show that they can comply with these provisions.
Right.
And same with you, if you think there's a traffic concern, you should explain what that traffic concern is. Correct? Am I correct when I
Yes.
say that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so looking at the conditional uses that we need to consider, compatibility with existing uses,
Yes,
problems of fire and police protection,
right.
traffic movement and control, water, sanitation, utilities, impact aesthetically or otherwise on surrounding property values, noise, dust, smoke, odor, and other such factors appropriate to granting the conditional use.
Those are,
That's what we,
that's the laundry list of items we have to consider for a conditional use.
so when we say compatibility with existing uses, does that mean the zoning
Residential.
R1? Or does that mean
Means,
restaurant?
means,
or-
no, it means the surrounding properties.
So, yeah, I would- from my perspective, that would be
Throw it
a
out.
red flag, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Look, I understand the importance on facilities like this all too well. And I just have trouble seeing the fit for the neighborhood for obvious reasons. It was like the question I asked earlier about how often do we see 14,000 square foot homes up on a single lot? I don't know of any, truthfully. And so that to me is a concern with fit in the neighborhood. Now, if you want to combine all those three, it still is fit as far as
Compatible.
being compatible in some capacity. And so, that's just a valid concern.
Me, I think it would be density, because I worry a lot about water, because we're all living on that water underneath us, and we're pulling it out faster than we're putting it back in, and that's something I have a big concern about when you have a big unit like this drawing that much water for laundry, for dishes, for bathing, it's a lot. And I think if it does move forward, I know with MSI, what my neighbors did is they got MSI to agree to a well insurance, that if anything happens to their wells because of the draw from their big well, that they would take care of it financially.
Well, ultimately, the Plan Commission has to make a recommendation, so to either grant a conditional use permit or to deny the conditional use permit. Now, what has been done in the past is, in some cases, you can refer it back to if if the consensus or feeling is that the proposed use is not compatible with surrounding properties and the values of the properties, and there are other issues that you've identified, they can be summarized and you can, bring it back so that you have it in writing and send it to the common council. Or you can just by motion act one way or the other tonight on it. So, but it's been done both ways. Let's have staff make a recommendation based on your comments and bring it back for formal action.
Well, I'll make a motion to reject the proposal based upon compatibility with existing uses and some of the other concerns we brought up about potential sanitation issues, water issues, et cetera.
Should we list those now so we can put them in the record? Or is that enough?
Sure.
But you're talking about, just so we're clear, the compatibility is both on the number of units being requested and the size of the building and the existing residential uses, single-family uses in the immediate vicinity. That's what you're talking about.
Exactly. And it just seems to fly in the face of the 2030 comprehensive plan. That's why I reject it.
Before we go any further, Amy or Molly, do you have that? Can you regurgitate what you have written down, just so we have a firm base? If we want to change things, so be it, but.
So I have a motion to reject the proposal based on the compatibility issues in the neighborhood, Hamas identified the unit number, the size of the building, and existing uses in the residential area.
In questions around sanitation and water usage.
Neighborhood compatibility?
Yeah, that was the first one, yes.
Okay.
Do you view traffic?
We need a
part of
second,
that?
don't we, before we
Yeah, before we have
discuss?
discussion outside of him, we need to have a second and then we can discuss.
I'll second.
Okay, now we have discussion.
Is traffic part of that concern based on what?
It's not a great concern of mine, knowing what the traffic was to what it would be. The report I read didn't seem like it had a ton of traffic.
No, it's not.
That's not my concern, to
It's
be
not
honest.
really it's not gonna add much. But it will, to your point, I don't know if that's what you're getting, it's
I should have
gonna be
said
more
safety
traffic
traffic.
than the three individual lots would be.
Yeah.
It's
It
gonna
goes back
be-
to what Tim said, what are you comparing it?
Exactly,
There
and
will
everyone
be-
wants to go to the restaurant that is no longer
There
operating.
will be more emergency traffic, for sure.
And
right?
that's,
So,
yeah.
But
I was just,
Without a doubt.
from a being very specific as to why no, safety traffic, is that one of those items?
yeah, it's not my concern.
Okay.
personally, but,
I'm just asking the group, not.
Well, I think the character one is pretty substantial though. And I think it wasn't directly brought up. People are trying to say, well, it's gonna lower my property values or whatever. I think where it actually contributes to impacting property values negatively, if you put something, if you permit something that's very much out of character with its surroundings, is that the integrity of the comprehensive plan starts to get diluted and people aren't sure what they're going to get when they're investing in a piece of property. If a city is willing to kind of make reaches like that, put a big building like this in a residential area. So I think that does speak to, it's kind of like the master plan is kind of our covenant with our fellow residents, and that we're going to do certain things with this in mind. And so yeah, so the character book, I think that's plenty as far as a reason to support denying that.
and I do want to say, we're not against the CBRF in this community at all. I just don't think this is a place for it.
Yeah, I don't either.
I echo that.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Please, please, please.
So, just so everybody's clear then, this is a recommendation, which will go to the common council.
There you go. Do we have to do that?
Not yet. Not that I heard.
Okay, we are going to move on to number 13, discussion, oh, we already did that one. Okay. Seeing number 14, we are now adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for staying so late.
Been a while.